Hard mode faction wars coming to the game. I brought a faction wars expert alongside me to help out today. Let's get it. What's up, guys? MtgJedi here. How you doing today? I am so thrilled and excited to have my dude Bront on the channel for the very first time. I have been wanting to have you on for quite some time now. I'm so glad that you're here today. How you doing, my dude?
Oh, this is a lot of fun. It's been a great day so far. All kinds of fun surprises here, and it's great to finally get on channel with my dude as well. You know, we're gonna hear dude a lot in this collab. It'll be awesome.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Bront and I have been chatting and friends for a while now. He started streaming and doing his own YouTube thing, but he's been around hanging out in my channel for quite some time. So it's good to be on the content creator side and not just the hangouts. But today we are talking about hard mode faction wars, which we are hopeful is coming to the game. After that talk with the devs the other day, that's one of the things I'm most excited about. So let's talk about briefly what it's like right now and then what we'd like to see. We're going to bounce some ideas back and forth. And of course, we want to hear from you in the comments below. Before we get too far in here, we are going to go do a collab over on Bront's channel. We're going to be talking about some awesome practical things to help you guys. Super pumped about that. So we'll have all the links and stuff. Make sure you head over and take a look at that video as well. And subscribe to Bront because he's awesome. Okay, so let's dive right in. What do you like and not like right now about how Faction Wars works?
Well, I think you kind of agree with me with this too. Faction Wars is honestly my favorite content in the game as far as it gives you a challenge, it gives you a chance to build multiple different teams, it forces you to think outside of the box and use champions you wouldn't use otherwise. And it's naturally got a limitation without having the you can only use these epics that are okay on the third moon of the
Yeah.
nights and that you get in some of these other content. And it's fun. It's got some challenge to it as you progress. It forces you to actually progress your account in ways you might not think about otherwise. It forces you to experience champions you're not going to experience. And unfortunately, the big thing it's lacking is end game challenge, which is where I think hard mode would be great.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, we definitely do agree on that part. I think this is the best, most fun restriction in the game. Like they did it in such a good way. A lot of the
Mhm.
other areas where you have these type of restrictions, it's too restrictive, and this is just like the perfect balance. And I love what you said too about forcing you to progress your account in the best way. Because yeah, you do have to level up a lot of champions, but then once they're leveled up, then you have those to help you in so many other places. And it
Yeah,
creates a balance to your account that's really, really good. I
yeah. It
will,
never hurts to have a champion that's leveled up
yeah,
that you don't use at a moment. It's fine. A champion setting the vault at 60 is there to be pulled out of the vault later if you decide you need him from some other content. Never really
exactly.
hurts you.
Exactly. And also, like I think that Lydia is the perfect reward. Man, when you get her, she just helps extremely a lot with every area of the game, and she comes to your account at the perfect time as well. So I think that they need to have that kind of thought process as well if they go with hard mode faction wars. We can't have a champion. Well, first of all, we need a champion as a reward. Do you agree with that part?
Yeah, and it probably needs to be mythic at this point, given the state of the game, I think, as well.
I think that would be amazing. Another free way to get a mythic champion would be much needed and appreciated. I think people will be like, I'm never going to get them, but I think that that would be a great addition to the game. But I think the skill set on that champion needs to fit with I'm an end game player getting this champion. What does it do for me? So I
Yeah,
think it needs to probably combine some things, some abilities that we already have that maybe don't necessarily go together. I think would be very cool. I'm not sure exactly what that would be, but I think as long as they have a good champion at the end of the hard mode, it'll probably be a win.
yeah. I mean, Lydia plays an arena still, Lydia plays in Hydra. Lydia plays anywhere you can use her for the most part in end game teams and early game teams.
Yeah.
You know, is she the absolute best meta and everywhere? No, and that's not what we're asking for either. But she's a good champion and an option in any area of the game, and that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Okay, so what do you think about the current bosses that we have? And then what ideas do you have for the bosses that would come on the hard mode side?
Well, I think, and I guess maybe this is just my experience, but it feels like what they've leaned into with the last two new ones is they've been using the ignore defense, stun everybody boss a little too often for some of these, and that seems to be the end boss in a lot of them. That's really the grossest one because you need to have revivers. You need to make sure that your reviver isn't the one that's hit by it as well.
Yeah.
There's at least ways around that. Ally protection is really the key to that one. You've got the flip your buffs and debuffs champion, which is always the slog if you're struggling to get some damage. It's gotten easier as damage stats have gotten easier to get. Um, the other ones, honestly, are kind of forgettable. I guess one of them gives you the burns or the freezes constantly, depends on which is which. They're okay. They're not that great. And I guess there's the ally revive one. I don't think that's an end boss for too many of the factions. Actually, the one that revives, I think Sacred Order, I think is the one that's I can think of where that's the case.
Yeah, at one point they were balanced equally. Like there was the same number of bosses balanced across the factions. But
Hmm.
then I think that they've when they've added the new factions of Shadowkin and Sylvan Watchers, then that added extra ones to some of the bosses. So, but it's close. Like there's 3 or
Yeah,
4 for all of the bosses right now.
yeah, and I think all of them actually have some good mechanics. You want block debuffs on a couple of them. Some of them you can control with turn meter. Some of them you can not control with turn meter, and you need to find other ways to control them. Some of them you just have to find ways to protect your champions. Sometimes you just need to revive. Overall, they're pretty flexible. They're pretty good. As far as what you would want to do in a new boss, I guess would
Well,
be the move
let
beyond
me
that.
jump
Oh
in
yeah.
here real quick before we move on to the new boss and mention one thing about the current bosses. I only have one problem with the
Mhm.
current bosses. The mechanics are pretty balanced. They're challenging for when you're doing this content, but they're balanced. They're achievable, especially now with the current pool of champions. Before it used to be like we really, if you don't have these champions, you're gonna have a hard time. But now I think it's pretty balanced. They've added champions. My
And blessings
one,
help too, and stuff like that.
yeah,
So
my one problem with these bosses is who is this boss? Who is this boss? What is the purpose? Why do we care about defeating it? I don't understand. There's no flavor as far as I know, and there's no visual difference between the boss, even though it's different. And I don't like
yeah,
any of that part.
yeah, that's kinda lame. They all look the same. The only indication is the color, and if you don't memorize what color is what, it's
Yeah.
how do you know which one you're dealing with?
Right, exactly. So, moving into the hard mode boss ideas, I think we need to like implement that in a better way. So, but anyway, before we get to my thoughts on that, let's jump into your thoughts on what do you think the hard mode bosses will be like for this content.
Well, I mean, the quote unquote easy way to do it if they were to phone it in would be to basically copy these and make them harder with stats, and I hope they don't do that. I think what you need is you need maybe if they only do hard mode, maybe if hard mode was just 7 more floors and 1 more boss, that would be fine. If they wanna do 2 more bosses, maybe make it 10 floors and 1 at 5, 1 at 10. I think that would be more interesting, and then you could have 2 new bosses and alternate which one gets which a little more, which I think works better. As far as what the bosses do, I haven't actually seen like a turn meter control boss where the boss actually does turn meter control to you. So I think that might be kind of interesting. We've got the stuns, we've got burns, we've got freezes. I mean, heck, you got fears right there on one of them, although it's mostly stuns with that.
Yeah.
Um, I think actually turn meter control boss or one that does something to your turn meter would be interesting. Or maybe one, he does something to your turn meter, he's immune to his own turn meter control, so you need to worry about turn meter a little bit more with him. Um, Playing with debuffs is certainly interesting, but debuffs are always it can be cleansed, and I honestly dislike the irresistible debuffs as well. Generally, I find irresistibles are just kind of lame because
Well, I
resistance is already
mean,
hard enough to get.
that's basically the only way to mess with the end game stats though, right? Cuz
Hmm.
like if it's not irresistible, we'll build a team that has enough resistance. Just what's the amount that we need? And
Yep.
with the increased resistance buff, we can always hit the numbers, you know? So I'm not totally against irresistible debuffs, but on the other hand, I totally get where you're coming from on that one.
Yeah, maybe like a one person irresistible. And so instead of my entire team can't resist it, so there's no way around it.
Yes.
It gets one person irresistible. Everyone else could resist it,
I like
so it
that.
targets one champion.
Yeah.
Um, Again, it brings a little bit of RNG into it, which a lot of us players hate. But honestly,
Yeah.
that's part of the fun of it too.
It
It's
is. Yeah, it is. So,
and yeah.
well, right now, it kind of seems like Polarium's thought process was there's this mystical boss who is harassing each faction individually. So it's almost like the factions are all uniting within themselves to beat this boss. Is that just my impression, or does that seem correct?
That that's one way to look at it. The other thought is it's faction crypts, so I guess these could be spirits of the ancestors, but if we wanted to lean into the spirits of the ancestors that need to be settled or conquered or something like that, then you'd almost have to lean into making 15 unique bosses, which Raid is not going to do. I mean, that's a lot of work for them. So I
No,
totally
that's what
understand
I
why they
want them
wouldn't
to
do that.
do.
Oh, well, that'd be kind of interesting. And I
Yeah.
guess I guess to be fair too, you could have if they're not visually distinct necessarily, but they're distinct for countering each individual faction.
Mhm.
Dwarves, for example, dwarves tend to have high resistance, high HP. So maybe every hit would be max HP against the dwarves to kind of counter that a little bit, or
Right.
they would need a little more resistance, or they have the one that happens to be irresistible, so they can't lean into it. High elves tend to have speed a little bit more, so they might be that might be the turn meter control one we were talking about
Yeah.
beforehand. Same with Shadowkin has something similar, and you're probably going to have some overlap. So they may not be, you may end up with 3 or 4 different bosses rather than you know 16, I guess, or 15, however many that is. But
Yeah.
you can certainly tweak it a little bit because there's some similarity between the factions as well.
Yeah.
So
So I think what like on your side of things, you're kind of like really honed in on what could be some cool new mechanics for the bosses. And
mhm.
my thoughts fit really nicely as a puzzle piece and kind of like zoom out with like the broader approach. I think that either it needs to be flavor wise a boss where they are focused on overcoming it and coming together, or they could also dig into um, each of the faction rivalries. I do think it would be cool if they had more new bosses than not. That's one of my, if not my favorite thing about Raid, is the bosses and the mechanics. And I think that either way they do it, they could easily dig into it just like they did with the Odin dungeon.
Mhm.
So, what I would like to see for the bosses is champions as bosses or versions of champions. Like you could have maybe like a ghost arbiter as the boss for a dungeon, and that could be for the high elves themselves, or that could be for what's who do the high elves have a problem with? The orcs?
Yeah, like Danig Skullreap, I think, for example, has some special abilities against high elves, for
Correct.
example.
So we could, as that faction wars concept, combine that with the Odin dungeon type of ideas and have Danag with some boss abilities as the boss for the High Elves. And
Marima
then,
against dragons, demon spawn, that type of stuff.
exactly,
Exactly.
yes, exactly. And then they don't have to like reinvent 15 new bosses, but they could bring into the game 15 bosses. So that would be sort of a low effort way to create some really interesting fights. Do you think that would work out well?
Yeah, I think that'd be kind of interesting. You can also maybe even expand it a little more. And again, I'm looking at this from the asking them to design 15 fights might be a muff or not. You could lean into the unions a little bit more as well. So, for
Yes.
example, it might be you might have 4 different bosses, but they're made up from each union, and then different sections have to deal with each union particularly. So, it might not be just Shadowkin against the Demon Spawn, for example, even though that would make some sense.
Yeah.
So you might have a similar but different faction combination in, demons versus undead versus dark elves, for example.
But
And it
why
lets you
why
pretty
not like why not do both? We don't have to limit
Oh, yeah.
ourselves, Bront. This is
Oh, yeah.
this we can do all of it. We're in
Mhm.
charge right now. We get to make the
Oh, yeah.
decisions.
No, that would be awesome, and, yeah, I love that concept. You know, I love the idea of using champions as bosses like the event dungeon there. I like the fact that it would lean into the certain people have affinity issues with certain other factions.
Yeah.
And to be fair, they keep on said they were going to lean into that, and that never happened. Maybe that's exactly what you're talking about. That actually be
Yeah.
kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then you could have more champions with that type of stuff, or even they could actually add that into more champions as well.
Yes, I would love to see that.
They're doing all these buffs with some of these older champions. You add
That'd
in
be
a
an
little
easy
bit
way.
easy way. Yep.
Yeah. I would love to see just like my big dreams for faction war hard mode would be to have a unique boss for every faction and the same amount of levels again. So we have what 21 levels right now. I would love to see another 21 levels this for each faction, a unique boss for each faction, and then on top of that I would love to see a separate like area of the faction war where we do the unions versus each other. And that could be really cool. Like that would be a big content drop that I think people would really like. And I think the difficulty level needs to be very challenging. Like harder than however hard we're thinking, harder than that. Because we're going to keep scaling up with more and more things. And I think giving us another long-term goal is like think about how long it takes to do faction wars, right? A
Mhm.
year? If you're really good at faction wars, maybe 6, 7, 8 months. But like we need that amount of time again, probably. I don't think we should be able to go just like beat it like it's a new faction?
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to have people that are going to be able to do that, and you have some level, something. If you work with the key system, you're still going to have some limits of preventing people from just going all the way forward with the keys,
True.
and that's where, for example, they're talking about, if it was 10 levels instead of whatever on hard, it's less content they have to make that's pretty superfluous. Because I mean, yes, it's nice to have the 10 levels, but really,
Yeah.
what you're going to care about is the highest level anyway, most of the time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so some of that becomes throwaway from their end. So let's not waste too much effort into that.
Yeah.
You make it 5 keys for the first 5, 6 keys for the second one. 6 keys is nice because then you only have to run it 3 times and you're done.
Yes,
Um,
please.
not that getting the level one, lifts are that bad, but
Yeah. I would
it's
like
it's
to
annoying.
see like in like the best of all of the worlds. I would
Hmm.
love to see a secret room type area where it's just epics only is the only like, don't get crazy with it, but
Hmm.
epics only for a fight or two or an extra reward if you beat any of the bosses with epics only. But I don't think we need to get into like stuff with rares. I don't think we need to get into stuff with like affinities. I think that's probably too much of a restriction, but what do you
Hmm.
think about that?
No, I mean, honestly, I think what you could probably do is you could make something interesting where one of the floors, the 3-star requirement is not just beat it with all your champions alive. The 3-star requirement is beat it with only epics on your team.
Okay. Yeah.
Something like that. Or you could change that on a couple of floors, but maybe that becomes the level 10, or maybe level 5. The level 5 is the boss scaled down, but you can only beat it with epics. The level 10 is you can do anything, but it's a much beefier boss.
Yeah. Yeah, for
You
sure.
know, and you got to be careful with this stuff too. Amius, I don't know your feelings on Amius. I
Hate him.
don't like Amius. Yeah, he
Yeah.
is. really overly complicated. I don't want them to go that route,
No, me neither.
but at the same time, I appreciate making a complex enough boss, and that's why Odin's actually been great. Odin was a
Yes.
complex enough boss. He required some thought, but he did not require a single way to beat him,
Right.
and he did not require all kinds of weird regearing RNG to do it either. It
Yeah.
was pretty straightforward. You build these champions, you build a couple different teams this way. Here's 20 different teams, they all work.
Mhm.
Let's go.
Yes, I totally agree. And from Polarium's perspective, the Odin stuff was a huge success. So
Yep.
hopefully they will take that and implement it in the future. I know they have other plans for the event dungeon, so I'm excited to see what those are. I'm hoping maybe we get one like right away. Over the holiday season would be really cool. We get like maybe a Sir Nick buff
Yep,
and then
or
see
a
him.
Sarnek dungeon. Sarnek
Yes.
dungeon. You have to conquer the North, you know?
Yes, that would be great, that'd be great.
Rain Beast and
Okay.
Jingle Hunter for all.
Just not as a tournament prize, please. Alright, well, I think we've pretty much covered all the things. What is there anything else that you had thoughts and ideas on for this content game mode?
Well, I mean, from a rewards perspective, hard mode giving you only 5 and 6-star glyphs, that seems pretty fair, because right now I think you can get 4 still from the top end. It would be nice
Agreed.
to only get 5 and 6. Obviously, they're not gonna give us only 5 and 6. Definitely would need to be a separate path versus the Lydia path, because I don't want hard
Yes.
mode to count towards Lydia, and I don't want it to take away from getting to Lydia either.
100%, and I never even considered that as an option. I'm glad that you mentioned that because that did not even occur to me, but I
Yeah,
100% agree, that needs to be a separate
yeah.
path.
And then the other thing I think would be interesting is, and I'm not sure how to implement it, but being able to then make mythic perception and mythic resilience gear with
Yes,
the materials you got, I think would be a good boost. Because just simply getting those 2 in mythic form makes those sets a little more viable again, even if they're
definitely.
not gonna be pinpoint level viable, but,
Yeah.
that extra roll is so helpful.
I'd actually like to see a slight increase to the effectiveness of resilience. Like, add a little bit more stats there, I think. I don't know, just
Like,
nobody uses it really, unless you're early or mid game, But I
it's a
would.
filler set.
It's a filler set, yeah.
Yeah,
I think we need to see some mythical books in the reward track, and of course shards and all of the good stuff. I don't think
goals.
we need like giant piles of epic books anymore at that point. A couple might be okay, but like really think about the people who this is applying to when we're coming up with this reward track for sure.
And actually with the reward track, rather than having the champion be the end reward for this, especially if we're gonna try to make this difficult, maybe the champion is halfway into the reward, and then eventually getting a 3 or 4-star soul being the final part of the reward. 4-star might be a good one, maybe even 5-star.
Yeah, I love that.
So especially as a mythical. So and maybe it's not the halfway through, maybe it's like the last 6 rewards, for example, are the champion, then
Yeah.
1 star, 2 star, 3 star, 4 star, 5 star.
And they could do that the same way they kind of did Carnage with it, like the reward path and then the chests.
Mhm.
But I'd be fine with just the reward path. And I love the idea of the soul being in there as well. That would let them eliminate this crap silver rewards and add in real things that would benefit our accounts.
You don't want 200,000 silver?
I call it blow my nose silver. Like that's all it's good for. All right. Well,
I
I
think
think that'll do it for us here today. But we want to hear from you in the comments. What are your ideas for hard mode faction wars? And did you like the ideas that we came up with today? One of the best parts about the raid community is you guys, like the community and the ideas, all of us coming together. And with the knowledge of Plarium watches these videos, like, and they read our comments, they're going to see what you put there. So make sure you give us your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. And now go head over and watch the video on Bront's channel. Bront, any parting words here?
no, this has been fun. It's been a dream of mine to do some of this stuff with you guys. I mean, heck, way, way back, I don't know if you recall this or not, I helped you with, a video with Gamaran. I pulled Gamaran and Wyther, and you ended up doing that on my
Yes.
video,
Yeah.
and, We said we've been working together for a while, talking together for a while, and the raid community is awesome.
Yeah.
That's the reason I'm here now to give back to it. That's the reason MTG is here. He loves giving back to you guys. And you know what? He's able to be a content creator because you guys support him as well. Much appreciated. You guys are so awesome.
All right. Thanks so much for watching all the way to the end. You guys are the best. We'll see you guys in the next video.